What's up, survivors? It's Chief from TeamWnJ here, back with the fighting animation tutorial. In this one, we'll go over the basic jab cross. Now, before we start, I just want to say that this tutorial is not meant to be followed step by step. We all have different fighting styles. I am, in real life, a Wing Chun practitioner and a BJJ practitioner, and you may not be. Our characters also fight differently, just like how an angry boxer does not fight the same as some grandmaster with a beard. Now that you know this, the fighting you see in this tutorial will be based off my Wing Chun background. That being said, let's get right into it. First of all, this is a plain white scene with my character and a heavy bag, nothing too special. I downloaded the bag online. You can find the link in the description down below. It has a rigid body applied to it. My fists also have a collider body, which just allows it to interact with each other. Render settings. I have ambient occlusion enabled as usual, no global illumination because it lags. Lighting, I have a key infinite light set to white with shadows at 50% gray. I also have a fill omni ambient light set to like 40-50%, something like that, go figure. Alright, so by now you should have your character set up in a fighting stance. Let's go to the render settings real quick, and I'm going to set my FPS down to 24. That's my personal preference, just to save render time. If you want to use 25 or 30, then you do you. Let's head over to the project settings by going to the bottom right hand corner and hitting mode project. Then let's change the working FPS to half of what you have it set it to in the render settings. In my case, it'll be 12, since 24 divided by 2 is 12. If you're using 30, it'll be 15. If you're using 25, then God help you, I'm kidding, set it to 12. Now, one last thing before we get into the animation. A punch is not simply moving the arm forward. That's an arm punch, it has no power. A real punch uses the entire body's mass. How we do this is using power from the ground. The term for this is force flow, or a kinetic chain, when potential energy flows through your joints, causing a chain reaction which adds up to the total damage output. So what is this chain? Typically it starts off with your rear foot, traveling up to the knee, to the hip, through the spine, into the shoulders, elbow, wrist, and knuckles. So let's get into animating. Let's start by using frame 0 as our initial point and using frame 12 as our final point. That's 1 second exactly, since we're using 12 FPS right now, and we'll adjust it later on. I'm going to set a keyframe for the hips, shoulders, and fists on keyframe 0 and 12. This will be our point A. Now I'm going over to the midpoint, which is frame 6 for me, and I'm going to launch my hips forward and upward, just to emulate my leg kicking off the ground. Now this looks okay, but it doesn't really look too convincing, so how I'm going to fix this is by sinking him down a little bit. What sinking is just moving forward and down slightly. Think of this like a spring. If I push a spring together and let go, it would just bounce off and fly away with lots of force, right? So next thing I want to do is rotate the shoulders. This is emulating the potential energy going up through the rotation of the spine. Finally, we can push the fist forward. Now my guy is out of range of the heavy bag, so I'm just going to cheat a little bit by moving my entire guy forward by a few meters. In reality, you would actually move his feet, but we're not going to get into this in this tutorial. We don't want his hand to be hyperextended, as that would mean a loss of energy. Always leave the arm bent a little bit. Now, this position right here, keyframe 6, is point B. Remember that. If we play it back right now, we'll find that it's a bit clunky because I've set the keyframes out of sync. An actual punch is really fast. It's less than a second. So to fix this, I have to compress all my keyframes together so that the distance between point A and B is equal to the distance between point B and A in as little time as possible. So after compressing this, you can see that I have it in 4 frames. This is what it looks like exported. So, I mean, that looks pretty good to me. Just the timing's right. Just add a little bit of motion blur and everything should fit in together pretty well. So, nonetheless, we should move on to the cross. Now, what the cross is a rear hand punch. It's often referred to as the power hand punch, since the rear hand has more distance to accelerate, and damage is measured by force, which can be calculated by mass times acceleration. And of course, the more distance you have, the more acceleration you can get. Now, in reality, the cross would double up on the jab. What this means is it would pretty much fire off at the same time, but we are making a basic tutorial right now, so let's keep this simple. So let's jump right into it. Let's copy the keyframes from the hip and shoulder and paste them immediately after frame 4. That's my final frame for the jab. We'll also go to point B of the shoulder and change the rotation to the other side. Now I had the shoulder rotation as 20 degrees on the jab. Theoretically, the cross would have a higher rotation since it's the backhand. After you've rotated him so much, he will no longer be looking on target, so make sure you set keyframes for his head to counteract the body's rotation. Now if you're feeling particularly optimistic, you can also animate the eyes, but I'm a bit lazy. Once the hips, shoulders, and head have been animated, you can make sure the lead hand hasn't fallen out of position, so make sure your guy is still protecting his head. We'll now work on the actual cross. As usual, make a keyframe on the initial and final frames. That's your point A. Go to the midpoint and move your rear hand forward. That's our point B. Now my guy seems to have completely missed the bag, but I'm not going to care about it too much. So seeing as this is the power hand, I'm going to add some rotation to the arm so it gives it a bit of a twerking motion. How much we're going to rotate it by is a little bit past parallel to the ground. We're also going to hyperextend his arm since these are Minecraft rigs and the rear hand rarely reaches the target if not fully extended. Now I'm going into the frames between point A and B to make sure the arm isn't extended too early, and mine are. So what I'm going to do is just bend it slightly backwards to make the motion seem more natural. I think it's also important to note right now that the working playback is 12 FPS, but the final render will be in 24 FPS. So, I mean, after that, that's pretty much all there is to it. Here's your final result. Thanks for watching. As always, if you like the video, make sure to like it. If you have any questions or suggestions, put them in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe to get notified of new videos every week. Bye!